To meet at 3:30. This is the meeting of the Del Norte Solid Waste Authority, and this is our 3:30 meeting. And first of all, I'd like to know that all board members are present, and we'll start with public comment. Any member of the public can address the Solid Waste Management Authority on any matter on or off the agenda, and after receiving recognition, please give your name for the record, and comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Is there any public comment at this time on solid waste? Yes.
Really brief. I know everybody's been waiting, wants to get this going. So anyway, my name's Elizabeth Henry. I'm a county resident, and I'm here just to comment on a couple of things. And actually what brought a lot of things to mind was the article in the paper this morning, and the headline, moves to reform authority continue. And you know, it used to really irritate me when people started speeches or articles with, well, I went to Webster's and this is how they define the word. But I did go to Webster's because to me reform really caught my eye. And you know, what that really means is to improve or amend what's wrong, corrupt, unsatisfactory, or to change to a better state. As a member of the public who uses a service that's now provided, I don't see any of those things happening. So again, what I find is that there has been no real clear reason stated why there's even a plan being pursued to change the JPA into any other form or to privatize it. I read the minutes of the June 12th meeting and looked for that to see whether something came up, and nothing really did. What I read was that Supervisor Gitlin has a vision of selling the transfer station. Mr. Larson thinks maybe Contra Costa County has a better plan, and then Mr. Sparrow from Recology, I think, had some good points about wanting to look at costs and maybe cost cutting and improving service. And that made me think that of all of those kind of goals, that one actually has a process in place. And that is the change order. And what made me think about that is the recent happening with green waste. I participate in that, and I'm one of those people. I happen to have service on Wednesday, and I don't always get my green can out there. And I think it makes so much sense that Recology has said, let's cut it from 3 days to 1 day. It saves on the carbon imprint of trucks just going around for nothing. And I'm sure it's a cost saving. So there is a way to do things. And I would think if Recology has any type of information plan, whatever, that they would like to bring to the Solid Waste Authority, there's a way already. You don't have to throw the whole agreement out. There's a way to make changes. Now, if someone can state clearly, you know, what needs to be changed, I think you can find a process to do that. And I guess it's frustrating to me as a member of the public that discussions continue without a real clear statement of what is the problem and why does it need to be fixed. So anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Yes.
Donna Westfall. I had two things I wanted to talk about. One was after spending 52 hours at the Board of Supervisors meeting that just adjourned. Before they adjourned, I asked about, doesn't the solid waste mirror what happens on the county level? And since the county took a 13% payroll cut, why wasn't that reflected at the solid waste? And so I would like an answer to that. And then the second thing is about jobs. I understand, and I might have the figures off, but if I remember correctly, about 1,000 pounds of clothing, used clothing, is put in the solid waste each and every week or each and every month, and it seems to me a huge waste when that could be repurposed. You know, just if we put people to work sewing up blankets for the homeless, repurposing clothing, having quilts made up. So I'd like to just remind people, and this is probably more for the county and the city, that if we had more businesses, private enterprise, creating jobs here, there would be more revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I will, oh, there's another one. Come on. Oh, come on up. I'm sorry. Come on up. Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
My name is Norma Williams. I'm the Vice President of the Del Norte County Employees Association, SEIU 10-1. I'm here in support of the Solid Waste Authority's Employees Union, since their president cannot be here due to medical illness. Basically, I wanted to remind again the Commission that there is an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, basically a legal employee labor contract with the employees of the Solid Waste Management Authority. That MOU is binding. It was, I believe, signed in 2011 and is covered for the next 60 months, which would end approximately, I believe, in 2015 or 2016. When considering any, what I would call rabid obsession to privatize the transfer station, you do have to take into consideration your legal obligation under the Myers-Milius-Brown Act to meet and confer with the employees of said association. They do have rights underneath that MOU, which, by the way, mirrors ours with the county. Their employee rights are definitely specified in that MOU. So I do ask you to take that into consideration before you make any decision regarding privatizing the authority and also the transfer station. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. Let's go to the consent agenda quickly. There's only 2 items on there, the approval of minutes for the May 28th meeting and approval of the addendum to agreement for Smith & Newell for preparation of the annual audit. Is there a motion for approval?
Chair Nia?
Yes.
I'd like to pull 2.1 for the minutes. I have an issue with some of the comments which I don't believe are correct. So
That you made?
That, yeah, they're addressed, I think, generally about me, but I would like to have a discussion and pull it out and discuss it at this time.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's go. Is there a motion to approve 2.2 on the consent calendar?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? I'll second. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Let's go back to 2.1. Mr. Gitlin.
Yeah, Chair Nia, I'm looking at public comments, and I see that Ms. Henry is here, and I'll read this to you, and it disturbs me that how it's noted. I'll direct this to Program Manager
Ward.
Ted Ward. Elizabeth Henry, county resident, addressed the board regarding the need for correct information issued to the public and incorrect information reported on KIEM TV regarding comparing authority rates to other facilities in the region. Now, the way it's presented, it's as though it's as factual. So I have some problem with the language and the way it was noted, that these are in fact opinions from you, Ms. Henry, and as well, you can shake your head, but I can tell you that I have a different opinion than yours. So, Mr. Ward, I'm a little concerned that you're presenting whatever I presented on KIEM Channel 3 TV as incorrect, and I'll take issue with that. So, if we can add some verbiage in there which puts it in opinion, in that person's opinion, that it is not stated as factual, because clearly we have different interpretations, and Ms. Henry, that's your right to have your opinion, as it is my right to have my opinion. Obviously, I feel my opinion is correct and you disagree with me, that's your right. But I would like to change the verbiage in there to read in Miss Henry's opinion, she alleges that there's her correct information and that my information she alleges is incorrect. And I'm saying this because these are matters of public record. And the way I read it and the way it hit me initially is she's right and I'm wrong. And I'm spewing out incorrect information. I have data to prove that that's not correct. But when it appears in the minutes that way, it presents a different story. So I'd like that language corrected accordingly, Chair Nia.
Okay. Mr. Ward? Mr. Ward?
I was just trying to record what was said, and...
I have no fault with you, Ted, I'm just bringing the way it
If you
came
could
from.
repeat again the language that you're more...
Well, I'd like the word in Miss Henry's opinion. She alleges that the information she presents is correct, and she alleges that my information is incorrect that was broadcast over Channel 3. And it comes across as a way it bespeaks the word opinion. It doesn't come along as factual. I know these are small points, but people read these minutes.
Okay.
And the way it hit me, and my instinct and the way it hit me was, I'm out there irresponsibly spreading the bad, incorrect information. And I would patently disagree with that. So, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss these rates today here at this meeting.
So is that a motion
So moved.
Is there a second?
with that amendment? I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll amend the minutes to reflect that.
Can you repeat the motion in the second? Who was that?
I second it.
Let's, okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
you should allow public comment before the vote.
sure. Is there, did you want to comment on your comments from last month?
I'm Elizabeth Henry. I don't want to make an argument out of this, but the only reason I came was because there were very definite numbers mentioned, and the numbers are not correct, because the county charges by tonnage, and Brookings, Curry County charges by cubic yard, and that's
Okay,
what I brought up, and I don't think that's alleged or that's opinion. Those were very straight facts, and possibly the actual facts could be included in the minutes, and then that's, you know,
Well,
would
we'll
be
have
what
that.
I said,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Because I don't want my words changed either.
Okay, your words aren't changed.
Okay.
Your words aren't changed. Okay, so that's the consent calendar. Yes,
Oh,
Yes.
Mr. Lonsdale.
come on up. Yes,
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Bill Lonsdale, and I live in Crescent City, and I'm standing here in sympathy for two of your board members who must be exhausted at this point. I have no dog in this fight, but the public record is, as has been pointed out, an important thing. And before we go changing the public record, it seems to me that perhaps the advice of counsel should be sought, so that whatever change is made is fair to all parties. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, that's the end of the consent agenda. I am going to move on and change our agenda as it reads now. We're going to go to the budget because that was scheduled for 3:45 p.m. and we're running late. So we are going to go to a budget item, and that is item number, find it here,
7.1.
7.1, thank you. We're going to item 7.1, and this is a hearing, this is a public hearing on discussion of the, and possible action regarding a public, of the proposed 2013-14 budget and final adoption of the budget. Mr. Henry. Good.
Okay. This budget is essentially the same budget that was on the May agenda for your review, and there were no comments last month on this. I took the same budget and presented to the city council, who had some questions but did not provide any comments. About 45 minutes ago, this was discussed by the Board of Supervisors, and the only comment was from Supervisor Finnegan, who suggested that you could ask questions about budget item lines that were increased, and that decreases were fine.
No, I did have a question on, just in the summary on, you've got, do we know that, is that the actual cost of the premium insurance for liability insurance, or are we guessing? I mean, do we have, I mean, I saw the range in the report from Trindle, but do we have an actual, is that?
No, we won't have an actual cost until we prepare and submit the application.
Okay.
So we're looking for direction. That was based on the range of costs that,
Place marker?
yeah, the 5,000 is in the range of the 5 to 10,000 that Trindle suggested.
Okay.
And,
That was my only question.
yeah, putting some money in there makes it possible.
Trolley, did you have any questions?
No, just I want to acknowledge that the questions that I did have were answered by Mr. Hartwick earlier, excuse me,
Mr.
Mr. Hendrick,
Okay.
and I don't have any questions beyond that.
Mr. Gitlin, did you have any questions?
No, I do not.
Mrs. Wilson?
Actually, I do have,
There you go.
my concern is, with the budget is that it, as in business, it sets what we do this upcoming year, and I definitely believe that there is some bad in the budget, and I believe that we need to, again, stay in line with what the county has done. I don't understand also why the county took a cut of 13%, but yet the Solid Waste Authority did not on their budget. I don't know the history of that. I don't know if anyone on this was here at that time.
I think the 13% was the furloughs, right?
That was a cumulative cut too. That was over a 3-year process, I believe it was.
And there was a reduction of, I think, at least one position at solid waste management, so we got to the 13% in that way.
And
that
as
right?
far as, again, we're talking about cost savings, and I know, Ms. Henry, you've asked a couple of times now regarding, why people are looking to change this, and I know a lot of people that are out there are happy with their service. None of the service is going to be, we're looking to change any of the service, but there is a group of people that are not, and that's businesses like myself. Our garbage rates, when the new contract went into place, went up from, my personal ones went up from $420 to $900 a month. The Apple Peddler, my next door neighbor, went up from $900 to $1,900 a month. Walgreens went up from $1,300 to $2,400 a month. The school district, if they had not made changes and implemented different policies, they were expecting a $78,000 increase. They were able to work with Recology, who has been very good about that. I don't really know what the final outcome is at this point in time. I know that they're doing a lot of recycling. I'm concerned that, I hope that the kids aren't the ones that are rinsing out the milk cartons, because I certainly hope they're getting their lessons in what they need to learn to be successful in life. I don't know if we're paying a union employee to rinse out the milk cartons. I'm not sure. But regardless, there is a segment that is paying for picking up the lion's share of costs. We all know recycling isn't free. And so with that, those types of monies that go out, those affect the bottom line. We're expected to take a 60% increase like that. I don't think it's unreasonable for this body that to look at cost savings and cuts. And that's why we're here. It's our responsibility and duty to look at the amount of money being spent there. This is like a $3 million budget. I really would say it's probably more like 1.2, since we're under contract we have to pay out to the service providers. But anyway, there are mandatory expenses out of that $3 million budget. The payment to WSG, of course, our land payments, mandatory state fees. We have an interfund cost, well monitoring costs, audit costs, and I've added in depreciation with that. There are some expenses, though, that are not mandatory, and those are the expenses that we're looking at. And with that said, according to my calculations, is that as far as the JPA expenses, it's very top-heavy, and I certainly think, we definitely need our gate staff, but we have a very top-heavy organization, and somebody's paying for that. And that's why we're here. And I believe that this budgetary process, that we are looking at this budget, we need to decide, what, how to move forward, because it is impacting families in this community because it's impacting employers. And so, with that said, you know, as far as doing some research on, you know, what the different rates are in different areas, as well as the amount of staff. I've done a little bit of research, and I think that this body needs to take a look at what the job is and how many people we feel are needed to do that job. And so that's something that comes up at the budget time. And anyway, I'm under, again, it's my personal opinion that this is administratively top-heavy. I'm not talking about any of the line people, but I would like to see a decrease in the expenses and in regards to that.
Thank you. My only comments are that in looking at this budget, the full-time payroll is the same as last year, so there's no increases in that. This is the 25th of June. This budget is due by July 1st, which is just a few days away. And I think to look at personnel is a good idea, and I think that subcommittee that we have is the one to look at it over the coming months to make a recommendation to this board if there should be cuts made for our next budget, because we don't have the time to do it right now.
There's always mid-year review too.
I'm sorry.
There's always mid-year review.
Oh yes, I forgot.
I just don't, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say I forgot about that. We have a mid-year review in January.
It's the process that we had at this last meeting. Again, you know, I wanted to address these expenses, but the process that's been set up, it went immediately to the city council and then to the board of supervisors, and without comment from this board at this time. And so it's kind of wasted a month of our time, really.
Well, we can look at amending, and it's a joint powers
Yeah,
authority,
but-
so both bodies could amend the process on the budget. That you just need approval of city and county and this board, so.
You mean as we
If
move
we
forward?
change, if we change the process going forward on how budgets are reviewed,
Right.
it would just take ratification on the city and the county's part too, besides this board.
And what he's talking about is like starting earlier in the review process. You know, like in March or something like that, the city council does that. The city budget, we start in March to do that, so it's not rushed at the end.
Yeah, because again, if this were my business and I were bleeding money, I wouldn't wait until the next budget review process. If there were cuts that I could make, I wouldn't be putting that money out.
Okay.
I would be cutting right now when I need to. So,
Okay. Is
Well,
there,
it's before us.
I know.
What sections are you wanting to cut? Tell us where you want to do the reductions.
well, again, as far as, I believe the only discretionary payroll we have is for the, is not for county employees, but for the director. Is that correct?
But I think the budget's intact. I think that the budget is, the revenues and expenditures balance out. And I think if we're dealing with changing the staffing pattern of the JPA, I think that's a larger discussion, maybe beyond this particular budget document. In other words, I didn't know if you saw travel or if you saw any other budget lines that needed to be cut, or is your proposal simply to cut the executive director to half-time or something like that? And we don't have the information to know what that would save right now.
I do have a question on, just a breakdown on the 4 grants that are listed. What % of the dollar, or what dollar amount out of 60,000 spent in Delaware County? Because I've got payroll, which obviously gets spent here, is $14,000 on the 4 grants out of 60. Is there any additional funds on that that'll be spent here,
That is not spent here?
that will be spent here?
All of it is spent here except for, it depends on how you define spent locally. If we bought an airline ticket, is that local? Maybe. travel,
That's fair
buy
enough.
gas. Sometimes we buy gas when we're traveling outside the community. Probably the biggest single expense with an outside vendor is in the oil grant. We buy oil drain containers for people to use when they're changing their own oil,
Okay.
and those are not manufactured here. This is not like the previous grant where you had concerns about us contracting with an outside contractor. Most of these expenses, printing, advertising, special expenses stuff,
Okay.
is almost all
All
local.
local.
It's the
Okay.
biggest thing I could think of, and I kind of expected a question along those lines. So it's those oil drain containers, which are a little spendy, but they're probably the best single item we give away for people who change their oil, because it captures the oil, they can use them to bring the oil back. So I'd say the vast majority of it is all spent locally.
Okay.
See, the board may remember at the last meeting, I suggested some kind of a desk audit of our personnel. You know, we need, I can't say whether our personnel are overworked or underworked, because I'm not there. So there should be some organized way we can make that determination. But I'm hesitant to do it just from a budgetary perspective. I want to see the work on the other side.
Chair Nia?
Yes.
You know, I'm clearly hearing Commissioner Wilson's concern about administration, and I think we're bordering right on closed session items. And I think it would be appropriate for us to discuss that in closed session when we're talking about personnel, and obviously we're talking about non-union administration. So I'm going to defer to the point of wisdom to, if that's a discussion that needs to be conducted, it to be done so in closed session.
Okay, we can certainly do that. The other thing is, I think I hear a consensus about maybe starting our budget hearings earlier than what they are, so that we can have more input into that.
If I may help clarify that, because I
Sure.
was at the supervisory meeting earlier, and there clearly was some confusion over the process, because the JPA, when it was amended last year, the board identified all the things, the 10-member board identified the things they wanted changed in the JPA. The ordinances were the point of focus at that time, and the new revised JPA requires that any ordinances be ratified, but I think there was an assumption or a belief on somebody's part that the budget also had to be ratified, and so that's what I heard Mary saying. It was presented at the May meeting for comment before it got presented to the city and the county for final adoption today. That's the process we followed for 20 years, and that did not get changed.
Okay.
However, what I think Mike was saying, Supervisor Sullivan,
Yeah.
is if the city and the county decided they wanted to further amend the Joint Powers Authority to require that the budget has to be approved by this board and the city council and the board of supervisors, that is something that is within your power to amend the agreement.
Is that what you were suggesting?
Yeah, I mean, well, no, I think in the last year, the last time we reviewed, I thought the budget from solid waste came sooner. Now, obviously, and I'll take credit for canceling the last meeting, because we were down at a Transportation Commission meeting and didn't have a quorum, so,
And we didn't have a January or February meeting.
yeah, so, but I think last year or 2 years ago, we'd gotten the budget like a month in advance
Right.
of actually, so
Right.
it may just be an issue of that's a pretty quick amendment saying this, in fact, I don't even think that necessarily has to go
No,
before the city and county, and just say, we'll make it a policy that this board presents the budget a month in advance of when it needs approval on it.
Right, and
Or
since,
2 months in advance.
since you're accepting some responsibility, I will as well.
Oh,
The
okay.
JPA currently says that it should be happening on an earlier time frame, but we did get off to a late start this year due to some confusion at the beginning, and there's the balance of what Commissioner Wilson was asking for is actual expenses to compare to the budget, and trying to give you the most current actual information is more accurate. The more months we have under our belt, it's nice to have at least 9 months of actual expenses, which we get at the end of March. So there's that balance that you're looking for, of having the information earlier, but having the best information on actual expenses to look at in the context of that. There's no reason, assuming we're still here next year, and that we have all the meetings ahead of us, that we can't do this on an earlier time frame, and that, I believe, would not require an amendment of the JPA if that's in fact what Commissioner Sullivan was suggesting. Your names are
thank you.
switched, by the way.
Any other council member comments? Okay. If not, I'll open up to the public. This is on the budget. Any public comment on our budget for fiscal year 2013, 2014. Yes, public hearing is open. Yes.
Thank you, Tim.
Yes.
No, he's got it.
Oh, he's good.
I'll just, I didn't study the budget closely, but I do have a question. Maybe you could answer it. One of you could answer it. Well, first a statement. I'm glad to know that there's a focus. Now I know what at least one commissioner is concerned about, and that's stated very clearly, and I appreciate that because that's something to work with. I guess my question is, so that I can research this further, from my understanding that personnel costs, as many other costs in the authority, are covered by franchise fees, tipping fees, and grants. It's not county money, it's not city money, it's coming from mostly outside sources. Where is the savings? Franchise fees, I don't believe, can be used, I mean, they can't be put back in the county coffer. Tipping fees, cutting personnel, is Recology going to cut their rates because you cut personnel? I mean, I would like to see all of these things really looked at and put in front of the public, I can understand personnel issues, you know, if there's somebody not satisfied with how someone's doing, but the budget part of it, I think, should be out in the public. And then there's also the whole idea of grants that are brought into this county, and that's done with personnel. So if you cut personnel, you can lose just as much as you think you're gaining. Plus, again, the point I think I brought up last time, who's going to do the work? And if you want to pick people up into the county or the city, fine, but then you're going to have to direct the franchise fees, the tipping fees, and the grants toward those costs. So I think in the end, there's really not a savings. As far as businesses, it's my understanding that most of this recycling progress has been made because of private individuals, and now that there's a focus on businesses, and that there's going to be more requirement for recycling from commercial establishments. I think that's fair, and I don't care if kids are washing out you know, milk cartons, because I think there's an educational part of recycling, and it's part of what we need to teach our kids, and it's part of what we need to teach adults. So I think maybe the pressure of paying more may lead businesses to recycle more. The school district certainly did, and to me, you know, it'd be great to have them here and explain how exactly did they do that, and maybe Commissioner Wilson could say what does she do? Does she see any room in her business for recycling that might reduce costs? Anyway, I think there are a lot of questions around this issue. I do appreciate you not just taking it up as an issue today and doing anything about personnel, but I think there's a lot of information that needs to come out before you make any decisions, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Donna Westfall and Commissioner Wilson, you hit the nail right on the head. I agree with everything you said. I come from private enterprise, creating businesses, and I know and understand directly that if you don't make a profit, you don't stay in business. And that if you don't start reducing your tipping fees, then the people can't afford to continue having this kind of service. So if it means decreasing the salary and the benefits to the executive director of solid waste, then you do that so that you can stay in business. So I applaud you, and I hope that closed session takes this issue up seriously and discusses it earnestly. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Bill Lonsdale again. I want to thank Commissioner Wilson for giving voice to what many people have suspected is the agenda here. But I would point out that there's a difference between running a public entity and running a business. I take it that most businesses in California have what's called at-will employment. and you can literally do almost anything you want to do with an employee. In the case of the Waste Management District, these are public employees subject to civil service regulations, contracts, and the like. And so one must proceed with caution that one wouldn't have to exercise in one's business. But in running a public entity or supervising a public entity, you need to be careful. You need to take Ms. Rice into your counsel all the time, because a lot of evil can be done here inadvertently, and then we find ourselves in litigation. The other thing that scares me a little bit is I'm a residential consumer, and a totally satisfied residential consumer. And what I'm hearing is that there may be a desire to transfer the costs from businesses back to residential consumers. That policy decision to place the onus on businesses was made several years ago and has been enforced since. There's only one way to reduce what businesses have to pay, it seems to me. One is to have them become more efficient in their management of waste, which the school district has done, and which some other businesses may have done, or may be caused, as was pointed out a minute ago, by the laws of the marketplace, in which most of the board believes that you have to become more efficient to save or make money. The only other way is to transfer it back to the residents or to reduce the levels of service. I, for one, and I think I would be joined by people like me, don't want to see our very good service every week, without fail, on the given day or one day later, 365 days a year, we get our trash picked up. And it's reliable and regular. So we wouldn't want to see that changed. And when it comes down to voting, there are more of us than there are of you.
I know.
And, but we don't contribute to campaigns, so that's where it balances out. The final thing is that this whole business needs to be conducted in the open. I take Mr. Gitlin's point about closed session for individual personnel decisions. But when we talk about, as has been talked about, cutting the headquarters staff in one way or another, that's a policy decision. That's not an individual personnel decision. And that should be conducted in the light of public scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the budget? Yes.
Yeah, Andy Larson with the county. First of all, to make a clarification, I don't think anybody's looking at cutting any services to anybody being served now. That would not, I don't think anybody would ever go that way. And in all honesty, and with all respect to Kevin and Ted, you're looking at 40% of the budgetary figure for employee cost is 2 salaries. And I'm not picking on them. They've done a great job. But when you're looking at protecting this county, the citizens and the businesses, you can never privatize solid waste. The county will always have that responsibility. It can never privatize totally. But if you asked the two main contractors what can they not do that Kevin and Ted do, we have a responsibility to ask that question and get those answers. Not to step on anybody's toes, not to hurt anybody, but it's our responsibility to make sure that the businesses, the personal residents get the best service for the best price. And I do have a good relationship with both of them, but you have to look at everything. What can be done the same, differently with private business, not totally privatized? Can they get the grants? Can the task force do some things? Can all the paperwork be done that is required by the state? That's what we need to ask, and that's what needs to be considered in a budget. what can be done.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Yes.
I'm Victoria Dickey, and I'm from the county. I have a couple of disjointed points that I wanted to make. One is that I keep hearing, oh my goodness, you're going to be in litigation for a bunch of things. I mean, anything you do, you guys are going to get yourselves into trouble. With reference to employees, all the time I'm hearing about these big buyouts everywhere. That says to me that there are ways to make it worthwhile or to protect people who have become public employees that are working out there. They have an 8-year contract, 6 years, something still going, and that means that if you have to keep them under contract and contract with whoever, if you did privatize, there's a way to do it. You have attorneys yourselves. You can have them figure it out. What I think you're talking about right now is, do we have to pass this budget right now because next Monday is the end of the world? Well, next Monday's my birthday, so if you want to give me a present, give yourself some time to do this correctly. Give yourselves 3 or 6 months for finalization. Give yourselves a 3-month, approve it for 3 months if you can. Can you not?
I don't think we can. I think there's a spending issue.
That you must do 1 year? Can you come back and amend in 6
Yeah,
months?
we can
Call
amend
it
it.
back on the
That's what the
table?
mid-year review is.
Okay, all right. Thank you
Yeah.
very much for that information. One of the other things that I have found by listening to meeting after meeting and person after person who's in your seat or other seats is that no one seems to know what the top 2 people at the Solid Waste Authority do. You're telling me it's 40% of your budget, and I don't know what they do. I've listened very hard. I also keep hearing that, oh my goodness, there's no money that comes from the taxes to pay these. You go out to the dump, you pay a fee. That money is used to pay these employees. If that goes down, then the costs to the public, which are akin to taxes, because we can't take our garbage out of town, we are a captive audience, comes out to the same thing. If I give it to you and you give it to him, or I give it to you and you give it to him, it's out of my pocket. And so those are just some of my disjointed points, and with that, I will leave it to your great discretion.
Thank you. Any other public comments on the budget?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, we'll bring back. There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Moved and seconded. Would you please pull the vote, please, Ted?
Confirming that was Commissioner Sullivan that
Yes.
moved to approve and Commissioner Holly that
Yes.
seconded?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
I'm going to go ahead and not approve at this point.
Is that a no or an
No,
abstain?
no, I know.
No? Commissioner Holly?
Yes.
Chair Ania?
Yes. Commissioner Sullivan, did you vote?
I did.
Okay.
I voted first.
So, so it's 4-1, so that passes. That was item number 7.1. At this time, we are going to go out of order again, and we are going to go into a short closed session that we need to have right now, and then we'll be back. And in the closed session will be our board member, our attorney, Mrs. Rice, Mr. Shad, and Mr. Stanley, our auditor. Those are the people in the closed session right now.
Thanks very much. Close closure. Organized different laws. I think you're in this one. But I think people could, if they wanted to, we wouldn't
Sorry we took so long. All right, we're all back, and I'll ask our attorney if any action was taken in closed session.
No actions were taken in closed session.
Thank you. Then we're going to go back to the agenda. We're on item number 3, the director's report, 3.1, 3 through 3.5. Kevin?
Right, thank you.
3.1 through 5.
3.1 through 3.5?
Yes.
Including the Treasurer Controller Report for April. I passed out to all of you the May Treasurer Controller Report, which I didn't have before. I think Commissioner Wilson made a comment that our budget is hemorrhaging. I just wanted to point out that as of May 31st, our financial status through 11 months is a net positive of $183,468. And the bar chart that I gave you shows an increasing cash balance over the last 2 years. So between June 2011 and May 2013, our money in the bank has almost doubled. So we have, as of the end of May, we have a cash balance of $659,000. There has been some concern expressed about deficits, but I never have pointed out the fact that if we have an annual deficit or a budget deficit, that budget deficit is always paid for from our cash balance. Even if we run a deficit for any individual particular year, that's funded by our own cash balance. It's never cost the city or the county any money. So all trends are positive for this fiscal year, and also attached is the annual audit by Smith & Newell for the last fiscal year, 11-12. Although I admit that came while I was gone. I was on vacation last week and I haven't read it. You may have questions. If you have questions, I may have to get back to you on that next week, next month.
Kevin, I'm looking at this chart. Looks like the bottom fell out of August 2011, $58,000. It's aberrational. It's so
It was
different from
shocking.
any-
It was fearful. It was horrible.
Were you guys
What
open?
happened was, August is when we make our big loan payment, $150,000. So that's that combined with a $160,000 payment to Hamburg in the same month, just sucked the cash out of the.
All right, so August 2012, you're back up to a healthy 400,000, 80,000, whatever
Right.
that number is.
Right.
And are you projecting for August this year? Can you get, well, I know we're at May now, but June, but is August seems to be more normal? Are you not making the same yearly payments in August 2012 and August?
What happened was those two payments fell in the same month, and the Hamburg payment is now for July is made the first week in September instead of August. So we deferred it to the week following that month, so we don't have the big loan payment the same month as the first transfer station payment.
Okay.
So we fixed it. We avoided that, and I don't expect we'd have the same problem again. At least not this August.
Is there always such a, so it's a very high cash balance, and it seems that as it would be advantageous to, pay down, to save on some interest expense, or what type of instruments, is this all cash, and is it held in?
All of the money is held by the county treasurer, and they deposit it as they find appropriate.
It just seems like a very high amount of cash. I just wondered if there's an ideal amount that maybe part of it could be used to, pay down on the sublease, or, save on some interest expense. It's a lot of cash there.
Well, there's a number of reasons why it's starting to increase. That the last 2 years we've been funding depreciation, which last year, or this current year, I think is $110,000. Next year is $97,000. So that's money that's budgeted but not spent. And we're supposed to be accumulating sufficient funds to cover all of our depreciation, so that that net balance is counteracting a number of net deficits, including the post-closure liability, which is, even though it's reduced to 2.2 million, that still shows at the end of the year, shows us in a hole, and will probably for the next 20 years until that gets spent down to, or reduced down to zero. And we're, so there's at least a couple reasons why that cash is getting built up, but mostly because we're funding depreciation right now. The last 2 years, we've been covering that. And it is possible that the end of this fiscal year, because of the unanticipated increase in healthcare costs, $24,000, and the EBA consulting contract for another $24,000, that there were a couple expenses that might result in an operational deficit for this year, in which case the overages will be absorbed.
And
So that-
and so the money pretty much is held in something where we get interest on it and...
Yeah, all the cash is held by the county, and the county treasurer invests it very conservatively, I believe. Mike, you probably know more about that. Their interest rate is fairly small right now. It doesn't gain much. And our interest over the year is not huge. But we don't have any, we don't have any discretion over that.
Yeah, I'd like to look at possibly not maintaining such a high cash balance. I hear him saying they have depreciation in it this year, but basically, you know, using that putting it to work for us, either to you know, save on interest or, like I said, pay down on the sublease. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I would be even not opposed to actually beginning to chip off this and build a reserve fund for the landfill liability. I mean, we've been talking about getting
Right.
insurance, but why not begin to build a reserve fund? So at some point we can be self-insured. That would be the long-term independence on that.
And that's, the discretion of the board would be that, Mike, exactly. We've talked about it over the years, whether that would be a beneficial thing. I mean, you as a board could say, we're going to split off some of that cash flow and lock it up into a reserve. That could be for any number of reasons.
That seems reasonable.
A
A certain percentage?
Yeah, I
But-
mean, it's, I mean, we can take a look at it and see what the numbers, I don't have something right off the top of my head.
Yeah, let's-
If I'm looking at 659,
He's
I
got
don't know how.
629 cash, solid waste.
I would be inclined to say, let's start with 100,000, put it off to the side
Okay.
and do the reserve fund. I'd want to make sure that the expenses are met
Right.
going out for the payments to, you know, the different providers, but it would be nice 10 years from now, have $2 million set aside for the landfill liability as our liability gets smaller.
Right.
I mean, at some point, it could be, you know, there could be something beneficial out of that, but at least one of the things is we'd stop paying for the liability insurance we're gonna have to buy.
Yeah, and that's worth the amount of interest that you would make on $100,000 a year anyway.
Yeah,
What was the bill, $3,000 to
yeah.
$4,000 for
No, it's less,
insurance?
less than what, on fixed accounts, you might make 1%.
I'd be in favor of that.
Where will we put that?
It's a good use of
Somewhere we
money.
can get our hands on it, though, if we
I'm
need
sure
it?
the treasurer can.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
agree with that, Commissioner Gidlin? 100,000 maybe, to
Yep.
start?
Yeah,
What do you think, Rick?
I think it's a good idea.
I-
I think too, as the cost of doing business go up, maybe it's a way to keep from any rate increases in the future. I mean, maybe.
Well,
maybe we
I
can-
would ask, is there a reason to keep a higher balance than that? What's the reason that we're not putting this money to work, even at low interest rates? Is there a reason that we're keeping these high balances?
Well, I think it is being invested by the county, so we shouldn't say it's not being put to work. I'm not sure, and I can research what that interest rate is. My guess is it's pretty low. I don't think it would be necessarily invested differently if you...
Yep.
It's invested, so we're
Yeah.
just saying that 100,000 should go to a reserve fund.
The only
for us.
distinction is that you are intellectually setting it aside.
Right.
Because the truth is that if you ever decided you needed to pull out of that reserve fund, you could just as easily do that as when you put it in.
Right.
I would suggest we wait until the end of the fiscal year, we see how it all shakes out, and if we're still pushing that cash balance up, that's a very prudent idea to try to set some of that aside into a reserve fund. There's a number of reasons why you'd want to have that for post-closure, for we have a growing liability on estimated post-employment benefits. which is also a legal liability that the city and the county have. But we can talk about that more in a couple months, see how the fiscal year shakes out, and the county tells us what we really have, because the difficult thing in tracking is the reports that the auditor gives us is on a cash basis, not an accrual basis. So there's always expenses that are not, that we know have been incurred in May, but haven't been paid yet. So until we get to the end of June and everything shakes out at the end of the fiscal year, then we'll know exactly how much we have in that cash balance.
Anything else on your director's report?
No, that's,
Does the board have any questions? Okay, we'll accept the report. Let's go to discussion and action items now. 4.1 is the discussion of possible action regarding the status of the landfill repairs.
I'm glad we have a chance to get to this this month. Ted's been, I know that some of the members of the public wondered what Ted does, and he's going to tell you in these next items in some level of detail. And for those of you that are county supervisors especially, and if you're thinking about or contemplating doing something else different, these are the kinds of things that you would have on your supervisor agenda if we weren't here doing it. So it's your landfill, and we're taking care of it for you. Ted's got the details.
Okay, so we had significant erosion events this last winter, and it took us a while to work with the county engineering department and the road department to develop the plans about how to fix this. These erosion problems have become more severe as the years have come on, largely because of settlement and differential settlement that has affected the surface drainage structures. The landfill's like a big hill, and as things settle at different rates, then that affects all of the surface drainage structures and how effective they are. Essentially, it settled enough that we needed to move some of the, one of the drop inlets that was gathering surface water and directing it to drainage channels. And we also needed to move some of the drainage berms. So we did that work and worked with both the engineering department and the roads department to do it. We communicated with both the Regional Water Quality Control Board and Cal Recycle. And Gino Yekta of Cal Recycle came for an inspection yesterday at the Crescent City landfill, and we took him around with the LEA, the local enforcement agent, which is Brian McNally, and Huamua of the Del Norte County Health Department. And we inspected those repairs, and he found those repairs to be perfectly satisfactory. His main concerns appeared to be revolving around communications between the LEA and Cal Recycle, as the LEA is intended to be the eyes and ears of Cal Recycle, and they wanted to make sure that they were in the loop whenever there was significant repair issues.
Can you explain that acronym, Ted? Try not to use acronyms that are new to people.
Sorry, the LEA is the local enforcement agent for Cal Recycle, and in this case, it's the Del Norte County Environmental Health Department, which includes Brian McNally and a new hire, Huamua.
And these are the folks that put letters on restaurants and things like that?
Yes, as Brian has explained it, his responsibilities as the LEA, as the local enforcement agent of Cal Recycle, are about 5% of his duties. So he's got many different responsibilities, and this being just one of them.
I have a question. It looks as if there's not much shrubbery around there. Is there?
There's a reason for
It says
that.
grass, and so yeah, the rest of the area has, you know, to maybe help with the erosion control.
Well, that's generally a good idea. However, when one closes a landfill, the whole idea is that you want to try to limit the impacts of the landfill. And all of the impacts associated with the landfill are associated with how rapidly things degrade. And all degradation of materials in the landfill is limited by how much water goes through there. And so the closure design is essentially putting a big plastic tarp over this hill of garbage and then putting drainage layers on top of that. And so the design is to basically try to have an impervious layer. And so woody stems, alder trees and other things that might grow there and are growing the surrounding areas are actually something that we're required to cut to make sure that those roots don't have any potential danger of penetrating that liner that we've spent so much time and effort to create in the first place.
Gotcha. Okay. Any questions from the board on that one? Okay. Let's move to 4.2 then.
Mr. Chair, also, at some point, are we going to, and we don't have to do it this meeting, but I'd like to do the audit findings and cover those at the next meeting?
Sure.
Because we kind of breezed it, we can
Right.
just put it on the agenda for the next meeting as an...
Could you put that on there?
As-
The audit findings
I'd be happy to add those.
for next month?
Next month.
3.5.
3.5.
Okay, thank you. Give,
Give everybody a chance to take a
Look
look
at
at
it,
it,
yes.
including me.
okay, let's go to 4.2.
This is also Ted.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get that last request from Commissioner Sullivan. So, the next item is pretty thick, admittedly, but what that is it's an application to update our permit for the Crescent City landfill. We're required to do this every 5 years, and we need the help of EBA Engineering to help us with this, primarily because we need to produce a updated cost estimate that needed to be produced and stamped by an engineer about our post-closure liabilities, and specifically the potential liability should there be a non-water release. Namely, if there were a severe earthquake, like a subduction zone earthquake, and there was damage that then required some landfill repair, we needed a cost estimate for that as well. And so that was part of the work. So staff recommendation is that that we be authorized to submit this application to the appropriate regulatory agencies to update the permit at the Crescent City landfill.
I think the board is okay with that.
That's fine.
You have consensus.
I could take that as consensus direction. Okay.
4.3 is,
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for delaying this.
all right.
EBA, this is a contract that we hired last year. The total contract on that is $24,000. We're hoping to get most of this done and paid for this fiscal year, but some of that's carrying over, and that's one of the reasons that the professional expenses for next year is higher than we've had in the past. They're also looking at assessing landfill gas, and I noted this morning Supervisor Gitlin.
Yeah, I'd like to address that. I didn't know 4.2 is the time to do it, but apparently it is.
Well, we have a contractor that's doing a landfill gas assessment, and from that, we should be able to have a better idea of how much gas is generated from the landfill, which will advise us on whether there is any potential for beneficial use of that landfill gas.
I want to share with the group, during the time frame, I didn't have time to share what I learned from a gentleman who brought this to my attention. This is currently being done at about 500 landfills across the country, all much larger than the, what I'm going to guess is about 55,000 tons is what's in our landfill right now. So these landfills are much, no, it's somewhere in that. Our landfill is way too small, and the compost issue gives it because of our amount of rain here, gives us a very short season to extract the gas. It's quite frankly, it's a great idea. It's just not very profitable. Us being such a small landfill,
Right.
and then having such a short season. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be future technology to look at this again, but I didn't get a glowing report when I started speaking to the people who are doing this up in Portland, and
Yeah.
you know, they've got some pretty big units up there.
Yeah,
landfills.
the only reason I mentioned is I heard you mention it this morning. And I agree with your assessment. We're likely not big enough to have enough gas to make it profitable, but we will know more when this study is done.
Okay.
You know, I just have a quick comment with the report itself. I found it really interesting when I was looking at the earthquake causal event, and the fact that if we had a major earthquake, it'd be $500,000 worth of repairs necessary on that landfill. And my question, I didn't know whether to pose it now or to pose it when we talk about insurance, but is that something that insurance addresses?
We're trying to get clarification from Trindle, and we can talk about that a little more later as well. The insurance that we're looking at is landfill liability insurance or pollution liability insurance, which really is mostly looking at the potential of leaking from the landfill and contaminating wells. It's not clear what it would take to have that kind of earthquake coverage.
Okay.
But
that'd
that's,
be separate.
as Supervisor Sullivan was mentioning earlier, one of the reasons we would like to have a reserve fund for repairs, because this year, I mean, we have this cash balance that we just talked about, and we will possibly have to tap into that this year to cover these expenses that came up this year, but we're talking in this small range of expenses. I think the total repair costs this year were less than $20,000, and pollution liability would not cover those expenses. Most likely, it would be a different package if we were going to be looking at that.
Pollution liability then.
They, obviously, it's ideal, and most privately owned landfills have to have actually the money in the bank to do this. They're required to do that, but we're allowed to have a pledge of revenue from our transfer station so we can pay as we go. But we'd all feel a lot more comfortable if we had some extra money in reserve for that kind of big repair if it happens.
Okay, thank you. I know we
Yeah.
all think of buildings when we think of earthquakes, and the fact that we'd have to repair the cap or whatever it is at the landfill is...
Chair Ania, can I just address
Sure.
Commissioner Holly's
Yes.
question? We've actually had this, and Kevin had the same conversation with David Nelson from Trindell. And the amount of insurance required is, I suggested it'd be about $3 million, and he says, oh my, no, Roger, it's going to be about $10 million. The deductible is anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000, and that's covered by the insurance pool. Trindell is a series of, they have insurance pools, and it's really the insurance. We're actually very vulnerable right now. Should we have an earthquake and the landfill seeps into the water table, we are very vulnerable, and it's something that we need to address forthwith and not delay on this, because if something happens, and you never know when that might happen, this county is very vulnerable for the liability of polluted water.
Well, in fact, because this landfill never put a liner down underneath, there is no liner underneath it, so it currently is leaking small quantities of chemicals into the groundwater. The only question is whether there's a likelihood or possibility of that polluting drinking water wells. But it's the cover over the top that's helping prevent water from flushing through it that could be damaged by an earthquake. And
Okay, thank you. That was interesting.
So we're at 4.3?
yeah, this, I don't know if you recall, we started this a year ago, almost a year ago, when we were able to convince the water quality to temporarily reduce our landfill ranking from 1A to 2A, which saved us about $30,000. That freed up the money to do this investigation, which Ted has been diligently plugging away on, because this is probably the best thing we can do to prevent or reduce liability. Ted?
Sure. So the groundwater investigation work plan was a requirement of the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and there's an associated health and safety plan. This describes how we're going to, how we plan on drilling 2 wells, which we will take water samples from for a year, but hopefully we will be approved to use those as piezometers, which is a way of measuring the depth to the groundwater. And that, by gathering that data, we hope to demonstrate that the water is flowing in the direction away from the nearest residential wells, and therefore hopefully convince the regional board that it is justified in reducing our threat and complexity rating, which will significantly reduce our annual waste discharge requirement permit fee. So associated with this is another item that's on your agenda, and that is the contract with Fish Drilling in the amount of $9,837. There's also a smaller contract with Bush Geotechnical to help us with some of the sieve analysis that's required as part of the drilling, but those are the expenses associated with this work plan.
Do you need a motion to approve that?
It would be most appropriate if the board could approve the $9,837 contract with Fish Drilling and the groundwater work plan. Anything, Ted?
I don't think it needs separate approval unless the board has any issue of concern you'd like to address.
Yeah, we're plowing ahead with this as quickly as we can, because if we can't prove to water quality that we are not the 1A, there are most likely our fee
Rating
will bounce up again in December to $52,000.
Move to approve.
Well, a couple things. As far as the groundwater testing, hopefully that'll be done in a dry month. for that 4.3. And then I was wondering on this drilling, I had some wells put in for a gas station that I took out. How many wells are those, and did you get bids on this?
We did. There's essentially only one contractor in the area who's capable of drilling this kind of well in this location because it's in sandy soils, and so there's access issues. But we, of course, did look at other prices and made sure that we were getting the best deal that we could.
Where are they out of?
They're out of Humboldt County.
Hydesville?
The
drill?
fish
You're
drilling
talking about
is
fish?
Hydesville, which is
Yeah,
south,
which
it's
is
Humboldt
Humboldt.
County.
Okay, okay.
South of Fort
Yeah,
Worth.
it's right, you see their sign right coming into Eureka
Yeah.
on the right-hand side is,
Yeah.
but right before Arcata, I think.
And how many wells?
Two. I think.
Two additional wells. And again, we are hoping that we won't have to monitor the water quality in these wells forever. We're just going to do that for 1 year, and hopefully after that point, we'll be just doing depth of water.
If you even just look at the front page of this, this is an engineered plan. We got a lot of good assistance and cooperation from the county engineer, but the details on designing something that water quality would accept, we leaned a little bit on, again, on EBA engineering, since we had them on contract anyway for the gas assessment and for the 5-year update. They were able to review this for us also for a little extra money.
Mr. Sullivan made a motion to approve that contract. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public discussion on this contract for the 2 wells to be drilled? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Please pull the vote.
Commissioner Gitlin?
That would be yes.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Chair Ania?
Yes, thank you. And item 4.5, a discussion and possible action regarding research of the possibility to acquire landfill liability insurance.
Yeah, here we go. So, first thing is, if we are going to pursue this with Trindle, the application needs to be submitted by the county, because we're not a member of Trindle, but the county is. If we're successful in, and then they will work, or they'll help guide us through an insurance company, so it's not actually Trindle that writes the policy for this. I attached the application in part so you can see how complicated the application is. The word that I have so far is that they can't give us exactly the price, and Mike asked this earlier, the exact price and the exact details until we give them more information, because their determination on cost and risk is based on as much as we can tell them regarding our facility. But based on the ranges that they gave us, it's just a guess that because we have only one landfill, it's probably going to be in the $5,000 range, which is what we budgeted, and hopefully the deductible will be closer to the $25,000 deductible. So the board.
I like the high deductibles if that's possible, personally.
Well, especially if we're gonna build a reserve.
If we're gonna build a reserve, yeah, I'd go with a higher deductible.
The way the
Self-insured.
deductible works, so everybody's clear with that, and speaking with David Nelson, is it will cost the county nothing. It goes into a pool, and the deductible is paid by the pool of members, and then our premiums would go up slightly each year. So there is no out-of-pocket between 25 and 50, other than the 50,000 would be probably a higher rate. I'm thinking it would be higher because they're going to have to cover it. So it's interesting how they're going to make this this proposal when we fill out this application. I'm interested to see the difference between a $25,000 deductible and a $50,000,
Yeah.
since it will not cost Delnor County anything.
I have not been able to confirm that with him, but we'll pursue it and see if that's in fact how it would work. That seems unbelievably good to me.
Do you need direction on how much coverage?
He's going to bring us back the coverage. You're going to bring us that back after you do the application and submit it, right?
Proposals, right?
Well, we request the coverage and proposed limits.
Oh, do we
right?
have to request
At
it?
least that's what the application seems to say.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I'm skeptical about insurance companies in general. I actually like Mike's idea better, that building up our own cash reserve so we're covered is good. But in the interim, it's not a bad idea. I just think When you look at the complicated application, my concern is, first of all, it's going to take a lot of staff time, and one of the most important things we can do for ourselves is proving to water quality that we're not the 1A risk. And there's a obvious interplay between that high ranking and insurance coverage, so we want to provide the best face that we can. I think I do need more direction on what coverage you want, what deductible, but honestly, I think it may take us a little while to get the application done. Mostly, I'm trying to be responsive to what has been a considerable amount of interest in having this, in that it seems to come up at every meeting that we've had, that we don't have landfill liability insurance, and you should have that option. So I want to get us moving down that path so that at least we can take that concern off the
Chair Neal.
table.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion
Sure.
on 4.5 to instruct Kevin to bring us back 2 proposals from Trindell, one for $25,000 deductible, one for $50,000, with a face value of at least $10 million. And I'm using that as my my barometer, in that what was told would be the approximate amount for any kind of a disaster. And so I would like to make that motion to have Kevin research that, bring us back at least 2 proposals from Trindell on this.
Is there a
Or
second?
you're saying that you're asking us, the Board of Supervisors, to do it? Is that what you're saying?
Well, we have to make the request.
Yeah, no,
first.
there's that protocol issue. Good point. You can direct us to prepare the application. We work for you. There may be an extra step where we have to go to the
Board.
supervisors, but since Mike's the chair, I figure we can get on the agenda at least.
Through Jay.
And Jay's here to make sure that he doesn't get us volunteered for any more committees.
Well, the motion's on there. Is there a second to that motion?
I'm not,
Motion is for $10 million in coverage and
that-
yeah, 25
Make it a second?
and a $50,000.
Rick's
I just
thinking.
have more to say, I can wait for
Oh,
a second.
yeah, let's go for a second. Does anybody want to second that?
I'll second it so we can
Okay.
discuss it.
Okay,
Okay, discussion.
it occurs to me if we use a $10 million line, if we're hoping that this reserve fund will eventually cover $10 million, what are we talking about? 100,000 a year? 10, 100 years?
No, my thought was on the reserve fund that we were setting aside for our liability of the landfill, that the water quality continues to improve. 2.3 million that we, were able to reduce this last year, but that's, my thought is to replace that, not 10 million.
Yeah, I think that's going to price us out of range, is what
Yeah,
I'm thinking. I
and
understand
I
your
go-
reasoning, Mr. Gitlin. but-
Well, I want to clarify this. That's the discussion I had with David Nelson from Trindell, and I'm going to underscore this. It doesn't cost Delaware County or the Solid Waste Management Authority any money other than the premium cost, which will be anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000. The deductible will be covered by the insurance pool in whatever the damages are. And Mr. Nelson explained, he says, on something like this, you can expect somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 to $10 million worth of damage. To clean it up, it's kind of like an oil spill, Commissioner Hawley. It takes a while to get it done. And now, I think what we need to do is we need to get some coverage ASAP. We are vulnerable right now, and if something happens, our county is on the hook, and that could be a disaster. That's a bankruptcy issue.
Right.
Because we
Well, I
wouldn't
think
be able to.
maybe we probably need to amend the motion a little bit and say 5 to 10 million, and that, get a range.
Okay,
Because
I'm
it may
fine
be-
with that.
It may be astronomical the 10 million may blow it out. We may not want to go that high, but we need some coverage.
5 to 10? Do you agree with that on your second?
Yeah, I was gonna say $100,000 with 5 million is what I was gonna say. If you're gonna get a couple of bids,
Yeah.
you could,
I wouldn't think they would be able to, once they've got the initial application, they would be able to come back with a couple different sets of numbers. I mean, they're insurance agents, that's
It's a chart,
what
yeah.
they do,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, that'd be nice to have
Okay.
alternatives. But,
Any other discussion?
well, it
Any,
depends. Should we do a
any
separate-
public comment
make sure I
on
get
this
this.
liability insurance?
I think Commissioner Galen, you amended your motion, right?
Yes.
To say
I
5.
did amend it from 5 to 10 million. Again, it's my understanding,
yeah.
the amount of the face value is not the issue. We do need coverage, I had the piece of paper, unfortunately I did not bring it, that Mr. Nelson actually ran the numbers for me, and he said, this is what it will cost for 10 million, and the amounts ranged from $5,000 to $15,000. I think there was one in Colusa County that had 2 landfills. It was a little higher. So I'm fully expecting this premium will be in that $7,000, $5,000, $9,000 range for our very small landfill. So I don't think it's as draconian as you think it's going to be, but if you want to go 5 to 10 million, let's get the information and we can move from there.
Okay, so approval to submit the application contingent on, it has to be
And involved with accounting too.
Right.
through the
Could you
county.
please pull the vote on that?
Can I get the language on the county approval? I wasn't clear on that.
You want me to repeat my motion?
No, what I have currently is that Commissioner Gitlin moved to solicit 2 proposals from Trindle Insurance for a $5 to $10 million coverage policy, one with a $25,000 deductible, another with a $50,000 deductible. Commissioner Wilson seconded the motion, and then I heard conversation about there needing to be involvement with the county.
Oh,
as
the
a
county board of
council.
supervisors has to approve it too. Because
They
they have to submit the
They have to
application.
submit it.
Trindle.
They have to submit the application.
application would need to be approved by the county board of
Yes,
supervisors.
exactly.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Commissioner Sullivan?
Yep.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson? Chair Nia?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's 4.5. Let's go.
Chair Nia, I
Yes.
did, at the next meeting, I mean, I know Ted and Kevin worked last year getting our liability reduced with water quality. Is there some plan in place that we're going to go back every year or every couple years to continue to ask for a reduction of liability?
Is that what that well is for?
Yeah, we have to prove, they've given us 1 year to prove that we should be 2A. So
Well, no, but I mean, on, our liability shows it too. I mean, we were above 3 million or something initially in terms of liability of landfill.
Oh, those are 2 separate things.
Yeah, so my question is on that. They
Oh,
got
for the-
reduced to
the
2.3.
Post-closure liability started at 2.7, we got it down to 2.2.
Yeah.
Every year we will apply for a 1 year.
So we are applying on a
Every
regular
year, yeah,
basis.
we just got a 1 year reduction, and that was, because we got it set up, this one was like butter, smooth.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And I think they'll only, Ted, tell me if I'm wrong, I think they'll let us only go down to 15 years. Yeah, but in any case, in the foreseeable future, every year we will apply at the right time and we'll get that 1 year reduction.
Well, even
So,
if we got reduced
so
to $1
that,
million, that's where the reserve would come in and say we
yeah,
got it covered.
that is that's a liability from the perspective of the bookkeepers and Cal Recycle. It's an estimate of what that post-closure liability is, but that's separate from the actual pollution liability, which we're trying to get coverage on the
Okay.
landfill.
No, that was just a separate question I had.
Yeah.
Let's go to the number 5 collections franchise. Discussion and possible action regarding a request from Recology Del Norte to change the current green waste collection from 7 days, service days, Monday through Friday, to 1 day a week on Wednesday. And Mr. Sparrow couldn't stay and for this, but this was, we were going to do this last month. Did you have any comments that you wanted to make?
You know, I don't know very much about this. I was going to turn it over to him to explain why he wanted to do this, so
I think it had to do with their collections aren't very good during that week.
they don't have a lot of customers.
They don't have a lot of customers, and they like to do it 1 day a week.
But I think the question to ask is, this is a savings for them, is it a savings for the customer? Which is Commissioner Wilson's point that she was raising. If this is a savings for them, does that save money to their customers? Because I don't see that in here. Or is it? I don't see that in here. It's a savings to Del Norte, to Recology Del Norte, but I don't know if they're proposing a reduction of rate to the customer.
Well, they only have 138 customers, and most of these customers don't, like it says, they don't put it out every day. We can certainly ask that question, but yes, you can speak to it.
We really appreciate having that yard waste. I presume that's what you're talking
Yes.
about, the yard waste cart. Yeah, and during the winter when it rained last year, I never did put it out because I didn't get out there and fill it. But by golly, I'm going to try and do it this year because I'm paying for it every month. And so I think this year I'll get my money's worth. But I love that service because I have a small car, an Echo, with a trunk that's fairly small, and I would fill up one of those round 30 gallons or whatever they are with yard clippings, and I could fit 2 in the back seat of the car, and I could fit a bunch of brush in the trunk, and I'd take it to the station. So for me to pay for this all year long and have that car is really wonderful. And I have thought too that probably they're using a lot of gas with those big trucks. I don't care what day of the week it is. I appreciate the service, and I think that would probably save them a lot of money. It's a great idea.
That's good. And that's what this is, that they would pick it up on the date of your regular scheduled service. Yes.
No, they would pick it up 1 day a week.
They would pick it up 1 day a week.
Only 1 day.
They'd pick
Yeah,
it
I'd
up
like
1
to
day a
get
week.
some clarification on this. I'm not sure exactly, maybe you know, Chair Nia, I don't know how this is going to work, Kevin. If, let's say my trash day is Tuesday, which is today,
Yes.
in where I live, but now, instead of having my green trash, and by the way, I'm not one of those 138 customers, but I want to put a green trash can out there, and the day for pickup now is a Wednesday, then I'll have to put that standalone green cart out there on a Wednesday, even though my trash day is Tuesday, because it's a county-wide issue. Is that?
Yes.
Would you tell me how it's going to work?
That's what he's asking.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think it's an inconvenience, but at the same time, it's also 138 customers is not very much.
No, it's not very much.
And it's not cost efficient to have a truck operating 5 days a week to pick up 138 customers greenage. So I would support this because it sounds like it's a money-saving thing, a little bit of an inconvenience to the customer, that they'd have to put their trash cans out 2 days a week.
And there is the reason for my question, whether this means a reduction of cost to the customer, because I know that's an issue that you're all thinking about.
Well,
It's a savings for Recology, but is it a savings for the customer? It's not clear.
We can talk about that with Recology for future savings. I mean, Recology does a lot for the community, and I think by saving the fuel to the 1 day a week for 138 people, I don't think they're going to reduce the cost per month. In fact, I had never heard of customers getting 5 days a week for waste refuge. Where I lived, it was 1 day a week paying for it. Because it's an extra $9 a month to do that, right?
Yeah, it's an extra cost for the customers.
Yeah, and I don't think I would expect it every day.
Let me say, if you want to proceed with this, we will need to, with your direction, we'll prepare a change order to the contract to allow for this change and bring it back at the next meeting, and hopefully Mr. Sparrow can be here
Yeah,
if you
he'll
have
be
any
here.
further questions.
Sure.
We'll write it up as it is, and you can always tweak it at the next meeting if you
Is there a
want.
second to Mr. Gittens' motion? To have the pickup on Wednesdays?
Actually, or do we need a motion or just direction to staff? If they're going to bring it back to the next meeting, we'd actually vote on it next meeting, wouldn't we?
Yeah, well, however you want to do it. I just
So
want to
we
make
don't
sure
really
that
need
we're
a
not
motion, just-
doing
Is there
something that's
consensus then
inconsistent.
to,
Yeah, I don't think there's any action, it just is, are you asking us?
If you think this is okay, we'll
Yeah.
write up a change
Yeah.
order and come back to the
we'll
next
vote
meeting.
on next
There's a
month.
consensus there, I don't know if it's actionable.
You know, if we're going to handle it that way, I was wondering, Mr. Hendrick, if you could talk with him to see if could be any kind of a rate reduction for customers. I think that would be a
think
good
that'd be
thing for
good.
both the authority and for
It
He
seems to be
just
the
couldn't-
question we're asking these days.
yeah.
I'm
Is there any
paying
other
attention.
public comment on this issue? All right, see, and then we'll go to the transfer station now. Item 6.1, and this is establishing rate for the public scale services.
Oh, right.
And we've talked about this before.
Yeah, the idea was that it's possible that the current public scales may not provide that, and this does not commit the board to provide this service, but because of the process, the new process that we have for setting rates, we thought we could get this rate in place and And if you ever decide that you want to provide the service, then the rate could be adopted and ready to go. And I recall Mr. Gitlin especially thought this would be a good idea to get this in place.
Well, I think this was originally, the intent of this was to make it a convenience to someone, and I see Wes White here, that there is in fact a scale here at Hambro, and that it's a functioning scale, and it works, and it's certified. And I simply thought it was a good idea to have a second scale, just in case of mechanical issues or whatever would prevent someone from getting a bona fide weight, other than having to send someone down to Eureka to have a proper weighing. So is it my understanding that we are now in the process of certifying our scale with the state, DMV?
The last time we discussed this, what we had talked about was getting this rate ordinance rolling, because the certification and the training for staff is something that can be done fairly quickly if you decide that this is a service you want, but the ordinances requires several steps, including ratification from the city and the county. It's the first ordinance we've done since the new JPA amendments, so we don't know how long this is going to take, and we haven't done this before, so it'd be good practice for us to run this up the flagpole and see what everybody thinks.
So the training would be as we need it. It would go quickly.
Yeah, so this is not approval to start the service, it's just approval to start this ordinance process. This is the first reading. With your approval, we'll schedule it for
Next month?
the next month and consult with our attorney to figure out exactly how we do that through the city and county. My thought is, if you introduce it and the wording is acceptable, then we shop it to the city and the county to see if the city and county, while it's in the sort of the soft play stage, see if there's agreement or disagreement, comments or no comments. Then if it's all good, then we bring it back and adopt it, or you adopt it, we bring it back, you adopt it. If there's comments, we bring it back, amend it, and then...
Now, this is an ordinance, and under the new rules, the Board of Supervisors has to approve of it and the city council before it comes back to us again.
And it's got, paragraph 4 on page 2 says the authority does not intend to provide public scale services until and unless such services are no longer offered by any private company located in Delaware County.
Yeah, so it's there.
So it is.
Yeah, we have no interest in competing with a private company as long as they're willing to do this, but the concern was that service may stop and then people are driving to Humboldt.
Yeah.
Well, my concern is not that it would stop, and I see Wes is here. Maybe you could come up and address this. Is your scale ever down for maintenance purposes or recalibration or anything like that, where it's down for a week or 2 weeks or several days? Maybe you could address that to see if then the public is inconvenienced when your scale is down. Is that something that happens yearly, or, and then we're ready to go in case that happens?
And the scale is in a state right now where it needs some repair. Certification is still in place, will be in place. They're going month to month, and it will be down for some period of time. I don't know, it generally takes up to a week, sometimes just 1 day, but it could be down for up to a week when we do get it back in sync with where it needs to be. So I don't know if I
So
answered
there
your
are going to
question.
be unanticipated issues where the scales are not going to be operating for any set of given reasons. It could happen.
Ask that again.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that there's 365 days in a year. There's going to be some times that the scale is not going to be operable for whatever reason.
Just during the certification process, or if we elect to no longer have a set of certified scales, one or the other.
Okay, well, because right now you're doing that service for the Highway Patrol and for all of the people in Del Norte County who need that service, so we don't have to inconvenience them and send them down. Right now, if your scales are down, our folks are going down to Eureka to do this. And that's I don't relish anyone sending them down over last chance grade and back and forth. So if we can avoid that inconvenience to people because we have a backup scale someplace and it doesn't cost very much. I think, Ted, you mentioned it was less than $300 to do this whole process. Then I think it's a good insurance policy.
I would concur.
Yeah.
Okay.
So are we going to vote on this?
Yeah, we are. Is there any comment?
Well, yes, actually, I do like it, the way that it's written. And I believe the intention of this is if there wasn't a private company operating, that the county could then offer this. It could move, well, excuse me, the JPA could offer this, we can move ahead with it. But my issue would be is training staff and certifying. You know, there's a staff turnover, there's a lot of expenses with that. So if for some reason, you know, we didn't have a scale in Del Norte anymore, then at that point in time, I feel it would be good to, you know, move ahead with the Waymaster and the training. But I can see some expenses going out
Yeah,
if there's a staff turnover, which, you know, honestly, that happens, and as far as inconvenience for a couple days out of the year, I don't think was 38 vehicles a week or something. What was it?
A month.
A month?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, we'll take this step first then.
Yeah,
There's
just
been a
the
motion.
ordinance.
Mr. Gitlin made the motion.
Yeah, I made the motion to have this backup scale certified. That was some time ago.
Okay.
And the instruction is to get us up and running, though we're not using it, but we're licensed to use it.
Okay, our
So-
scale is certified, we just had it checked, so our scale is certified, and this is the step to get the rate
This is the
in
rate
place.
step. For the rates only.
I got it.
Okay. So you approve that. Is there a second to that motion?
I think Mary seconded.
Mary did?
I did? I will.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's been moved in second. And any other discussion?
Just clarification. Are we moving for ordinance number 213-01?
Yes,
Can
to
I read-
establish the rates.
Can I read back the motion?
Sure. It's to
Just
establish
because
the rates.
the action that, to move the ordinance forward is to waive the first reading of ordinance 2013-01 and direct authority staff to forward a copy of the authority ordinance 2013-01 for ratification by the City of Crescent City and the County of Del Norte prior to scheduling a public hearing for this ordinance at a regular authority meeting prior to its final adoption.
That's the motion. That's the motion. Okay,
Well done,
any
Roger.
public comment
Well,
on this?
I don't want any confusion over this, because we had this with the budget today. I'd like to have Martha clarify what the JPA says, because it's not ratification, it's not the right word.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, ratification generally happens after the fact, it would be after this is adopted. We're actually asking for approval of the ordinance before it's adopted by
Okay.
the JPA, so we don't have to
Okay.
repeal an ordinance.
So,
that-
Mr. Ward, change that word from ratification to
Approval.
approval.
Done.
Thank you. Any public comment on this? All right, seeing none, would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson? Chair Ania?
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 6.2 is discussion and possible action regarding approval of change order number 1 to the agreement of the Clean Harbors Environmental Services for household hazardous waste and conditionally exempt small quantity generator collection events.
Staff recommends approval. I'm going to help try to move us along on
Thank
some of
you.
these simple ones.
All right, is
That's
there any
okay.
comments from the board? Seeing no comments, is there any public comment on this change order? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? None.
Thank you.
6.3 is a discussion on possible action regarding change order number 17 for the contract with Hambro WSG authorizing agreement with Paint Care to provide free recycling of architectural coatings at the Del Norte County Transfer Station.
Yeah, this is somewhat related with the hazardous waste events. The largest expense we have is paint. Now, when they accept paint in the one time a year event, the Clean Harbors is going to get reimbursed from Paint Care. Now, this is to take paint every day, all architectural coatings, including the oil-based paints that we can't take right now. So Hammer's eager to do this because they think it will be a cost savings for them. It's tremendous convenience for the customers, and this is a fee that people are already paying when they buy paint. So it's a service that we should take advantage of.
Move to approve.
There
Is
you
there a
go.
second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any public comment on this? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
That was Mike and Mary?
Yeah.
Second.
It passes 5-0. Discussion, and this is 6.4. Discussion and possible action regarding request from Wes White, CEO of Hambro WSG, for a modification of the contract requirements for the performance bond. I'm sorry we didn't get to that last month.
Yep. Wes,
Wes.
you're on.
Thank you for waiting a month. Appreciate it. And tonight.
Currently, the contract that we have with Solid Waste Authority calls for an A-rated bond. We went out to the bond market. There's a letter from our insurance agent who basically has stated that since the downturn in the economy, it's very difficult to find an A-rated bond, not impossible, but difficult. And so we're requesting an exemption, the exemption being to the contract that we go with a B++ rated bond. That's pretty much the essence of it. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions of Mr. White?
When did we go to a CD? Just, I know at the last meeting, but didn't we start the contract out with a performance bond? Or no? Did it start out with?
We did not start out
Oh, it
with
was
a
a CD at the very
performance bond.
beginning?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we put in place with a CD.
Okay,
Right.
okay. Yeah, I don't have a problem with the B double plus then.
Yeah. Okay, is there a
Still
motion
investment
for
grade.
approval?
Yeah, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Moved and seconded. Is there any public comments this item? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Did you get
Thank
that?
you for that, Mr. White.
Did you get that, Ted? Rick, that was Rick and Mary?
Yeah, it was.
Second?
Just to approve it.
So moved.
Okay. This public hearing, 7.2, is a discussion, actually, it's not a public hearing, discussion of possible action regarding an executive summary prepared by Martha Rice, our legal counsel, regarding the lease agreements with the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank, known as iBank, and a report from a subcommittee discussing available options to execute the responsibility currently administered by the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority. So,
Probably be a good idea if we let Martha start with her analysis on the iBank, and then I can say we had one meeting with this new committee, and we plan to meet again after this board meeting. So.
Okay. Martha?
Oh, it's in, it's
7.2.
It should have been first.
Gotcha. Okay, so this executive summary is intended to try to simplify things. Unfortunately, it can only simplify things so much, considering that there are 4 individual leases. Although technically it is arranged as a series of leases, it very much resembles a loan. And that my conclusions after looking at the documents, after speaking to the manager of the program at the state, the manager of the iBank program, the principal amount can be paid off in advance, like a loan. Some other conclusions I reached while reading the different lease documents are listed under subparagraph E on the last page. Title 2, the transfer station is currently divided between the land belongs to the authority and the transfer station essentially belongs to iBank. The way the documents read is that when all of these leases terminate, which will be upon the payment of the obligation, both the transfer site, which is the land, and the transfer station will vest fully in the name of the authority. I also looked into if the potential that someone could manage the gates without paying off, without purchasing the transfer station or without paying off the obligation in advance. And you can do that if you have what's called a qualified management contract. That is an IRS test, but it is possible to do that. So there are still options open for the city and the county to consider. Basically, the conclusion is the iBank doesn't foreclose any of those options. The iBank lease doesn't foreclose any of those options that the city and county have been considering.
So does that mean that if a private company purchased that, they could hire a private party to do the gate? And as
No,
long-
that, the restriction for the qualified management contract
Right.
applies if we don't pay off the obligation.
Okay.
So if the lease is still in place and the obligation is still outstanding, you can get a private company in there to run the gates under the tax considerations for this type of financing. There are maybe other issues, but just as far, strictly speaking, with these contracts, that could be possible.
Could be possible.
It is an IRS test, it's not something simple, but it can be done. And also, the obligation can be paid off in advance. I've asked iBank for a precise number as of September 1. They haven't gotten back to me on that. But from my evaluation, it's somewhere in the $2.5 million range.
For the payment, for the loan.
2.8 August 1st, 2013. Is that the figure?
Oh, is that what I put in there?
Yeah.
Okay, 2.8, that's the...
300 to it on it.
That's the principal obligation minus the principal payments, and plus a 2% penalty, which the contract calls for.
Any board comments? Mr. Gitt?
No, I don't have any. I'm familiar, Martha Rice, and she's well acquainted me with this. Is actually, there are 4 leases, but 2 of them are identical. Is that correct? They're subleases. Is that?
Yeah, it's a series of transactions to get
Right.
the proper parties in the proper position to make this financing arrangement. So
What-
for the land, there's a lease and a sublease. For the station, there's a lease and a sublease.
Yeah, and again, what keeps changing is the amount of the obligation. I'm hearing numbers anywhere from 2.5, I'm now hearing 2.9 million, I've heard 3.2 million, I've heard 3.5 million. It seems to be a moving target, that
We'll have the
lease
exact number
obligation.
September 1st.
Yeah.
She'll get that. Thank you for the excellent work in doing that. It's been a long time coming. Is there any
Well,
other
I
comments?
can explain that the original principal obligation was $3,535,000. We've, the authority and the county have been making payments on that, and so the principal, some of it interest and some of it principal, so the principal has been reduced. For early payment, there is a penalty of 2%. So, you know, I don't think it's rocket science, but from my simple calculations, I did come up with a number that's in here. Approximately 2.8 million
Well, that includes
is
the
what
penalty.
would be a payoff amount, but that would, of course, have to be confirmed through iBank.
That would
and
be the penalty, too.
That includes the 2% penalty.
Gotcha, okay. All right, thank you. Any other comments? Any public comment? Thanks again for that great work. I know that was very time-consuming.
No, the only other comment I have is apparently attached to this was the comparison of rates for solid waste services in the region.
Uh-huh. It's on
And
there.
our current rates are the lowest anywhere in the region that I can see if you deal with tonnage.
Yes.
And I just needed to make that comment.
That was the business rates are in here too?
Are the business rates there?
No, I think these are just the South Paul rates.
Oh, these are just,
These are the transfer station rates. That's the rate that we set. All the collection rates are determined by the private company that
Right.
does the collection,
Ours is
which
cheaper.
is affected by the rates at the transfer station, but those rates charged by Recology were the rates proposed by Recology in their bid. So and I think Commissioner Wilson correctly points out that if in some way transfer station disposal rates could be reduced, that could affect collection rates, but it's in that order.
Okay.
I did do some additional research as well on other areas, tonnage rates, and so there are lots of, first thing I found out was the cubic yard versus the tonnage fee is a little bit deceiving because the cubic yard often assumes it's like 100% density, where of course a load of feathers is different than a load of bricks. So in figuring out the cubic yards, it seems as if I guess the claim is they have a higher profit on cubic yards. So what I found out was that in, let's see here, Florence, here I have a chart. Lake County has a cubic yard fee. It's about $98 for 3 cubic yards. But it's so hard to compare because they have mandatory collection in the city, but not in the county. Napa is $66 a ton. Lassen County is $62.50 a ton. Shasta County for household is $41 a ton. The demolition rate is $48 a ton. Florence, Oregon, it's $87 a ton. And I just did find some a newspaper article put out by, let's see here, the Mail Tribune.
In Medford?
Yeah, in Medford. So they are actually lowering their rates over there. This was June 2012. They keep a city, they have a code, city code where they target a percentage of profit that they allow by the haulers. Let's see, was it Florence? Where else was there? Oh, 87.45 in Florence, Oregon per ton. So there were rates ranging from 41 to 87 was the highest I found, other than our neighbors. And then just the cubic yard is very difficult, is what I was told, to try and convert because of the density issue. So, and that's what I found out about currently about the rates.
Thank you.
But again, some of these places have their own landfill. So some of them have different staffing levels. Some of them have, mandatory pickup in the cities, but not in the counties. So it's kind of a very difficult thing to try and compare some of the different rates. So I just want to be clear about that comparing apples to apples is kind of hard to do. It would take some more time than I was able to.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, appreciate that. We're moving on to 7.3, and this is a discussion of possible action regarding the approval of a budget revision of $2,400 from the contingency budget to professional services budget. Kevin?
Request that this be approved.
Okay, is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Second? Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's 5-0. Is there any public comment on transferring the $2,400 to one budget to another? Okay. Next, 7.4 is discussion of possible action regarding approval of a contract with Karen Phillips to provide services as recording secretary for the board.
Yeah, I think many of you know Karen. She
Yes.
was a former county clerk, and as much as we appreciate Ted doing double duty, you can tell it's a hard thing to do presentations, take minutes, and we strongly recommend bringing Karen on board at the next meeting. If you'll approve this contract, we'll get her started in July.
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, this is for not to exceed $2,000 for the fiscal year.
Yes.
And this is is this a new budget item, or is it coming out of a existing budget?
I factored this into the budget.
Into the budget, okay. Is there any public comment?
So that was Mike and second,
I
Rick?
second.
Thank you.
Okay, would you please poll the vote?
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gutland?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
No.
Chair Ania?
Yes. 4-1. Item 7.5, our last item, is discussion and possible action regarding approval to make an annual contribution to the California Employees Benefit Trust in the amount of $11,125 to fund other post-employment benefits. Go ahead, Mr.
I'm not sure if this has come up at the city or the county meetings. You may be familiar with this requirement. Our calculated requirement for deposits is really more in the range of 40,000 to 50,000 a year to keep up with the amount we're supposed to be putting aside for anticipated retirement costs. I know the county's cost is in the millions of dollars, and the city's is probably fairly high. What we were advised is that paying something is better than paying nothing as far as keeping in the better category of compliance. This isn't enough, and I would ask that you approve this accrual request form contingent on me really confirming with the county auditor before we actually make this payment to be sure that we've got the money. Because, like I said, there's some anticipated expenses this fiscal year. Even though it's in the budget, I want to make sure the money's available to do it.
It's in this current year budget?
It's in the current fiscal year budget,
Okay.
and it's also the same amount as in the budget that you
For
just
next year.
approved. Because paying something is better than paying nothing.
Yes,
And
yes.
I think we will be okay to pay this, but I want your approval to do that as long as it all pencils
Have we
out.
ever made any payments to them, to the CalPERS?
We've made payments every year.
We haven't.
The first year we made a full payment. It was 44,000, but that was the year we crashed. That was
Yeah.
fiscal 10-11 when we had a deficit, and then we paid less.
Any other board comment on the CalPERS payment? Okay. Accept a motion for approval.
I'll move for the CalPERS
Retiree Benefit Trust.
Retiree Benefit Late Contribution Accrual Request Form be submitted.
Is there a second? I'll second the motion. So that it's for $11,125. Any public comment on the benefit? All right, seeing none, would you please pull the vote?
Commissioner Sullivan? Yes. Commissioner Hawley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gitlin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Chair Ania?
Yes. And I think that brings us to the end of our meeting.
Yay.
It does. Thank you for attending, and thank the people out there for staying.
Right.
Our next meeting, I don't plan on.
here since like 7:30.
myself. Gene,
Watch them lose again.
I'm not gonna watch them lose.
Thank you, sir.